I fucking hate Scott Pilgrim versus the World. Right? Like, you can't even, like, that as far as I don't know. It's a good line, but my god, can no one keep a straight face on it.
Hi, I'm John, and you may know me as the host of Games.
Hi, I'm Andrew. I used to be an entertainment critic, film critic, and a few other things, mostly unpublished.
And this is Agree to Disagree.
Perfect. One take.
Okay. I love Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. I think it's one of the coolest movies that's been made about comic books, video games, and music, like all in one package.
Sure.
And it also has the benefit of like kind of just talking to specifically my age group, because me as a Nintendo fanboy.
Yeah, I feel like I classify under a lot of those things myself. I feel like both of us have a nice overlapping sort of spheres of interest here. I feel like it attempted to speak to both of us, spoke to one of us, not so much the other one.
So what is it that you hate about... Well, first of all, I'm going to give some background on Scott Pilgrim.
Go ahead.
Before I forget. So, for those of you who don't know, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is a 2010 action comedy movie based off of a series of graphic novels called Scott Pilgrim. And it was phenomenally a box office bomb, but is known as sort of like a cult classic among gamers and comic guys.
Starring Cera.
Stars Cera. There's there's a lot of music done by very talented people. The music for the band he's in the movie is written by Beck.
Yep.
It's just...
Anamanaguchi does the soundtrack to it?
No, Anamanaguchi did the soundtrack for the video game
Thank you for the
Ubisoft
correction.
made.
I will say, I do not like a lot of things about this, but I will say the soundtrack to the game, so good. Good. Huge fan of chiptune. Also, huge fan of Mary Elizabeth Winstead as Ramona. I'm petty. I can admit to that.
No, that's fine. There have been a lot of wonderfully attractive people who've been in things that I absolutely don't like.
Example out of curiosity?
Oh, God. Right off the top of my head. I can't think of one.
Well, fair enough. I see your point regardless. I am a huge fan of her. I was a huge fan of her in Death Proof, too. I will say her character kind of got the screw job in that movie where they kind of just abandoned her, and I'm still mad about that, but, minor things.
All right, so...
Yeah.
What do you not like about Scott Pilgrim versus the World?
Oh, God.
Where do we begin?
Okay. We'll begin with... I know it seems like a tangential topic, but we'll begin with my ever-loving... Love? You heard me. For Suda 5-1. I am a massive Suda 5-1 fan. I was introduced to No More Heroes back in high school and found all of it to be amazing. The art style of it, the style of combat, the gameplay, so amazing. For those of you who don't know, No More Heroes is a game made in, I want to say, 2008 by... auteur, video game director, and general crazy person, Suda 5-1, who has made a number of different games that you possibly may have heard of. Killer is 7, No More Heroes, Shadows of the Damned, Killer is Dead, Lollipop Chainsaw. Like, he's a known psychopath in the video game industry when it comes to the topics and the stuff that he chooses to cover. No More Heroes was the first game I was introduced to by him, and the plot line of No More Heroes, and I'm going somewhere with this,
no, that's fine. Yeah.
is that the main...
I see where you're going.
The main hero of No More Heroes is a man by the name of Travis Touchdown, who is a bored otaku man who, after spending all of his money on eBay to buy a laser katana, which is essentially just a beam sword, proceeds to decide, oh shit, I'm out of money. How do I make money? I know, let's become an assassin for a living. Proceeds to kill a man that is on an assassin list, and turns out he is on the list of top-ranked assassins because he killed number 10.
Yes.
And then the game, a French lady shows up and is like, hey, look, you're number 10 on the UAA now, the United Association of Assassins.
Yes.
And you are pretty much going to be targeted by everybody underneath you, so enjoy that. Travis then decides to cut his way from number 10 to number 1 because, fuck it, if he's going to die, he's going to take everyone down with him.
Exactly.
And that's the plot line.
If you're going to die, you might as well be the best.
Exactly, and that's part of the plot of the game. And
so the presentation of that game is definitely tied into the same sort of visual style and personality of Scott Pilgrim.
Exactly. Like, it's the same...
The whole idea is that you did a thing you wanted, and suddenly you found yourself in way over your head, and you need to be constantly punching up.
And it's the same sort of very otaku, comic book obsessed, video game obsessed sort of nerd culture that is very prominent in all of Scott Pilgrim. And it's that same kind of stuff that infests Travis Touchdown and all of No More Heroes. Like, I really think that if you look at those two comparatively, they're very much two different things that are born of the same brood. They're very similar in their topics, in their style of presentation. I will say, part of the reason why I don't like Scott Pilgrim is because of the fact that I played No More Heroes first. To me, No More Heroes has always been... And obviously, you can like two things. I know plenty of people who like No More Heroes and love Scott Pilgrim, and that's fine. But to me, I observed both in a vacuum, which was one after another, by complete accident. And I just couldn't see past that with Scott Pilgrim. And not just from a comparative aspect, just because I believe that while I do love some aspects of Scott Pilgrim for what they presented, there was so much more maturity and depth to everything that happened in No More Heroes. Not just from a violence aspect, because it's a way bloodier game. So if you don't like the gore, don't play it. But it is a way bloodier, way more violent game, and they cover a lot of those topics. One of my favorite fights in the whole game is the number 2 fight against Bad Girl, where they identify all of the crazy nonsense that has gone down, and it's a very, very self-aware and just completely destructive moment on everything that's come so far. You feel very guilty about all the killing that's happened before that when you truly see what a sadist the rest of the top ranks are. And to me, I think it was just a very, very unfortunate accident of observing Scott Pilgrim just post playing No More Heroes that I couldn't see the two as separate entities and conflated them, and now I just can't see them differently.
I see where you're coming from. It's in the same vein as you've already picked your favorite band, and there's another band that's in the same vein as it. But it's like, no, I'm a Nirvana guy. I'm not a Pearl Jam guy.
Yeah, I'm a Led Zeppelin guy. I can't listen to Rush anymore.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, so here's where I stand. Is I personally think that Scott Pilgrim is like the ultimate love letter to that era of video games, and also it kind of struck a chord with me when it came out because the character of Scott was I'm a little bit older than him, but
so I'm older. I'm older than characters that I recognize with too.
There's that whole idea of like, excuse me, Scott Pilgrim is a character in his 20s, and he hasn't quite figured out what he's doing with his life. He went through a terrible breakup, and he's kind of just drifting. Yeah,
he's a meandering, emotionally destroyed human being.
And he's trying to fill this void in his life with finding people who will admire him. Yes. Or surrounding himself with people that like unabashedly love him.
Which is why he hangs out with Knives.
Which is why his Knives go out, because she, in his words, she's not complicated. You know, it's just nice.
She loves Scott for Scott, and there's something very appealing about that.
Yeah, because they have that in common. Scott loves Scott too.
And I will say that.
I will completely concede that the character of Scott is a prick.
Oh yeah, and admittedly, I hate to make another weird offshoot comparison because I feel like this is going to be Andrew makes a metaphor the show. Otherwise,
that's all right. You and I both speak in metaphors. It's fine.
But I feel like part of the reason I didn't enjoy Scott Pilgrim. Looking back at more recent experiences with media, when I was an entertainment critic, I got browbeaten by a friend of mine into sitting down and watching all 3 of the first seasons of Girls. I cannot stand that show anymore. And I couldn't when I first watched it, and I always found it because the primary character played by Lena Dunham, that for the life of me, I can't remember her name, is the worst human being I have seen on a television show. And don't get me wrong, there is something appealing about that, because I like the villains from something like Game of Thrones. I'm a huge Tywin Lannister fan, and people actively hate me for that. But there is
comment. I got no comment.
No, exactly. I mean, we can get into a discussion about that later. But the point is, like, I'm not adverse to having a more negative person in the role of the main character.
Right.
I actually enjoy that conceptually. But I think part of what bugged me so much about Scott Pilgrim is there is a lot of him that seems, and obviously you'll disagree with me, but there is a there is a lot of him that does seem very irredeemably narcissistic. And I do find that especially very frustrating for a main character, and I think that was part of the reason why I couldn't get past some of my, like, frustration with the movie, was that he did seem very much not irredeemable, but definitely a very, very self-centered person, to the point where I couldn't really see past that when it came to the film.
Fair.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to share with you some reviews for Scott Pilgrim.
Oh,
because as I mentioned before, Scott Pilgrim, it was well beloved by its fan base even before it came out. Everyone was excited to see this movie. We all expected great things because it was directed by the guy who made Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead.
I will say, side note, before you continue, I am a huge Will Wright fan. I do love all of the Cornetto trilogy. I actually went as Sean for Halloween. I'm a huge fan of Will Wright, so please...
Edgar Wright. We're not talking about SimCity. It's all right.
I'm bad with names.
It's okay.
You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
I'm a huge fan of Edgar Wright. I'm a huge fan of his work. I was actually upset that he wasn't working on Ant-Man anymore, but we still ended up with Ant-Man, so whatever. But no one say that, oh, you just hate it because that... No, I genuinely love Edgar Wright's work.
No, no one will argue that Edgar Wright is a fantastic filmmaker. So this movie came out, and it bombed in the box office. It was something like an $85 million film.
Oh, wow.
It was the highest budgeted film he had ever made. But in comparison, I think Shaun of the Dead was like an $8 million movie.
Really?
Yeah.
I guess that makes sense. The effects are pretty simple in that. In that movie.
And the movie grossed worldwide. I don't know if I actually wrote that down, but it didn't even make back half.
Ooh. Yikes.
It did, however, sell really well on home sales.
Right.
But, I mean, by then a studio's already written off a movie.
I mean, so I remember someone doing this recently on a video I was watching. They were doing the calculations for actual budget and the fact that your
that was Red Letter Media.
Yeah, that was Red Letter Media when they were doing their box office calculations. So I think using the same formula as they did at $85 million plus advertising, I got to imagine that comes to at least 100, because they spent I remember seeing ads for that movie constantly.
There were ads for it. There was the whole thing at San Diego Comic-Con.
Yep.
They put together like a live concert with Metric.
Oh, wow.
Which, for if you don't know, Metric is the band that did the song for Scott Pilgrim's ex-girlfriend.
Yeah.
That was Metric that did that. And it was just like they pulled out all the stops. They wanted this to be a big movie. Yeah. They had wanted this to be such a big movie. They bought the rights to Scott Pilgrim after the first issue of the graphic novel came out.
I had no idea.
That was Universal bought the rights to that immediately.
That is a bold move on.
I know, right?
Yeah, that is some trust and some intellectual property right there.
So I'm getting a little off topic, but I also just want to say one last fact that I did. For the record, I knew this episode was coming up, and I did some research because it's.
No, totally. I don't.
But what's the name of the creator of the Scott Pilgrim graphic novel series? His name is Brian Lee O'Malley.
Yeah.
First of all, the entire storyline is based off of a song called Scott Pilgrim by a band called Plumtree, which was based out of Toronto.
This explains the massive Canadian feel of this all. This is a very deeply Canadian thing.
Don't quote me on this, but I believe Brian Lee O'Malley is also from Toronto.
That would explain things.
And the song Scott Pilgrim, by the way, it's on the soundtrack. It's a really cool song. It's a little simple. It's a simple little pop punk ditty.
Some of the time, that's all you really need, though.
But the line that caught him was, I've loved you for 1,000 years, which is a repeated chorus line that they have in there. Or I've liked you for 1,000 years.
Okay.
And he globbed onto that, and then he wanted to make a comic, but he decided he wanted to make a manga-style comic, or shonen-style comic.
Shonen is the term.
He wanted to make a shonen-style comic after only reading a single issue of Ranma 1/2.
Okay, I've got many questions, but okay, I'm not gonna bother. That
he makes this comic.
Sure.
He puts out the first issue. It gets published through Oni Press.
Right.
And Universal buys the rights to the movie, and that's like back in 2008. And then...
Can I just say, quick note before you continue? Yeah. Good on this guy.
I know, right?
He takes a song that he enjoys, writes a comic out of it, gets it published, and immediately a major movie studio is like, yes, we want this.
Yeah.
Like, in anything. Good on this creator for just being that willing to be like, yes, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to do something different, and someone immediately snatch it. I may not like this movie, but way to go. So whatever your name was.
They make Brian Lee O'Malley.
Thank you.
But so they make the movie, and the immediate reviews, it got mostly good reviews, but it was definitely mixed, and there was definitely a bit of a sort of like, you either are part of the crowd that likes it, or you're part of the crowd that like, you're either a person who likes comics and video games and things like that, or you're a regular movie critic, and you look at it and you're like, this is not for me.
See, I feel like as someone who remembers some of the climate during that time, especially when the movie came out, I definitely remember feeling that as I walked out of the theater this is going to alienate a lot of people who are... I remember, and side note, there is a joke in the movie that is a joke about how Final Fantasy IV was named Final Fantasy II in the United States. And I went there with a really good friend of mine who is a absurdly nerdy person, spent way too much time on WoW during his entirety, like most of his high school life. Very intelligent dude. Who I'm sitting down with, who's like, Andrew, what the hell is that? And I'm like, oh wow, okay. If I can sit down and get next to this guy who's been playing video games for like 13 years and he still doesn't get this, you are shooting for a very small niche.
Yes. That's probably even the major issue the movie had in box office, was that they were shooting for a very specific sector of people.
Right.
People like you and me.
Exactly. People like you and me who would catch a Final Fantasy IV as Final Fantasy II joke and be like, that's kind of funny.
Or like the fact that when Scott Pilgrim has to pee, his pee meter is the exact same. It's the same meter that's in the Super Nintendo Zelda game.
Exactly. Okay, good to know I'm not the only one who got that.
No, I lost my mind.
Yeah.
Okay, so here are some of the initial reviews from the movie.
Okay.
First of all, I got Kevin Smith. Kevin Smith, super positive.
I do love Dogma.
That movie is great. It's spellbinding, and nobody is going to understand what the fuck just hit them. I would be hard-pressed to say he's bringing a comic book to life, but he's bringing a comic book to life. That's my Kevin Smith impersonation.
Kevin's admittedly, I mean, let's take a second and break these down part by part, because I feel like that's a valuable use of time. As much as I do love Kevin Smith, I do love his movies. I love Clerks is great. Dogma's good. Dogma's in fact one of my favorite movies of all time. If we were to do we're gonna sit down and talk about like our favorite movies, Dogma is probably my favorite comedy ever.
All right.
I love that film. And Kevin Smith is a very intelligent, generally well-spoken guy, but as he himself admits, half of what he does is very experimental. He purposely does things that don't necessarily have commercial appeal just because he really wants to make movies. And that's fine, but I also think that means he's not a very good judge of what is good to a mass public. As much as I do love Kevin Smith, his opinion is not the majority opinion.
Right. I globbed onto Kevin Smith because like he's a very outspoken person.
Oh yeah, totally.
And he loves to love things.
He reminds me a lot of the larger, older Chris Hardwick, where like nothing he's going to do, as much as he does hate certain sectors of the world, he's not going to do a lot of things specifically based around negativity. A lot of what he does is just going to put out positivity. That's fine.
Yeah.
But that also does mean that I'm a lot more wary of if Hardwick or him says something positive, I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to trust you completely, guys, because you do everything unabashedly positive, and that's fine. It just doesn't mean I'm going to trust you on a critical review piece.
So for a middling review, we have Variety.
Oh, okay, yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. An example of attention deficit filmmaking at both its finest and its most frustrating. Anyone over 25 is likely to find director Edgar Wright's adaptation of the cult graphic novel exhausting. Like playing chaperone at a party full of oversexed college kids. Okay,
so let's break that down part by part. Because, first of all, the idea of that movie being ADHD, fine, but, I mean, there are so many movies that I can think of, especially that I've watched recently, that would be a movie that easily could be classified as having ADHD, that I'm like, that's still an enjoyable film.
It could also be that this movie was on the cusp of that kind of filmmaking.
Okay.
I mean, I'm trying to think of movies that were in that same vein that came out before Scott Pilgrim, where but I'm also...
Well, sorry, remind me of release year. I want to say
2010.
2010.
2010.
I was out of college. I was in college at that point. Okay, so I thought I was still in high school when that happened. Apparently, I was wrong. Well, okay, so the movie I can think of recently that I watched that I thought definitely had some form of attention deficit disorder that was thoroughly entertaining, Edge of Tomorrow, is one that I watched that I remember enjoying the crap out of. Just a genuinely very enjoyable film that severely suffered from its ability to stick on a frame. Now, that was potentially in the fact that the entire basis of the film was dying and reliving your life in the style of Groundhog Day. But still, that movie felt tiring, but that wasn't the flaw with it. A movie can be, to me, that's a bad criticism. A movie can be tiring without being bad for its tiring.
So what do you think would be the major difference between a movie like Scott Pilgrim and also a movie that would be, say, like your Deadpool kind of movie, you know?
Oh, that's a decent question, actually, because Deadpool follows a lot of the same tropes as Scott Pilgrim, but because of its lack, you know what? I think it might. I mean, besides the obvious difference in this,
the movie is self-referential as fuck.
Yeah, I will also say when you break the two down, the primary difference between the two is the comedy style. The fact that, despite the fact that Scott Pilgrim is occasionally self-deprecating, the entirety of Deadpool is just based on nihilism and cynicism. Like, that's the defining gags.
Okay, that's fair.
Like, let's make fun of everything, let's light everything on fire, salt the ground, and then burn it again, because why not?
Yeah, why not?
And that, I guess, is, to me, the defining aspects between those two, is that they technically both suffer from the same problem of having attention deficit disorder, by the way of this Variety reviewer, but one is a lot more clinical in the way that it does it, and one is a lot more, it's part of the... I honestly think it might be the filmmaking. I can see how shots in Scott Pilgrim tend to move very quickly. I always felt that movie was very rushed, but I don't think that is the primary flaw to me. That's getting at the tertiary issues, and that's fine, but I just don't think that reviewer did it justice in either the right or wrong direction. I believe they blamed a lot of its flaws on something that doesn't exist, while also not acknowledging the stuff that's good that's there. I don't like the film. Let's make this very clear again. We began this episode with I fucking hate this movie. I still don't enjoy this movie.
Right.
But I can acknowledge some of the things that it did well, and I think this Variety reviewer is just not doing that.
Okay, so for a negative review, we have The Hollywood Reporter, which they say...
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is a discouragingly limp movie in which nothing is at stake. A character can die. I did quote fingers.
You gotta explain
then
that.
Simply rewind. Then simply rewind video and come back to life, or change his mind about his true love and then change it again. Scott Pilgrim's battle isn't against the world; it's against an erratic moral compass.
So I will say, I want to hear your thoughts on that one, because we've gone through what I thought of the positive review and what I thought of the middling one. You threw some thoughts on the middling one. I, as someone who knows that you love this movie, I want to hear what you think about that one.
So first of all, I'm going to say that this reviewer is a person who probably has no background in video games, hasn't played video games, isn't into it. Because like when they specifically like the words like rewind video, it's like, well, no, he died, but he had that one up he scored earlier.
Right.
So that makes sense to me as a video gamer. It's a cool like tip of the hat kind of thing.
Right. Okay.
And so he gets that second chance. It's like, okay. Also, like the idea of him, he changed his mind about his true love and then change it again. Are they saying that he thought Knives was his true love? Because that was never implied.
I will say this, as someone who remembers the movie only through hazy recollections of an interesting bunch of college years, I still remember that being a very established sort of one-sided thing.
Yeah, it was that Knives was obsessed with Scott, and Scott was just happy that someone paid attention to him.
Right, that's kind of how I always felt about that. The fact that, are there any other possibilities that we can think of that they might be referencing? The
only thing I can think of is maybe they're talking about the fact that there's that moment at the end in the climactic battle.
Yeah.
Sorry, I keep burping.
I don't know.
The climactic battle where Scott pulls out the sword of true love and then dies. And then when he comes back, he gets the sword of self-respect. But actually, like, that's actually one of my favorite parts of that movie. Because,
go ahead.
I mean, because there is this desire when you're like a desperate single person, where it's like you want to find true love, or you want to find someone to love you. But it's like at the end of the day, it's actually more important to learn to love yourself in the healthy way, which is to have respect for yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that was a really cool message to have at the end of the movie.
I will say that was one of the few moments that I do remember kind of enjoying, was the idea that, first of all, it bucks your typical movie tropes of true love will save every single situation.
Right.
And especially for a movie that felt, to me at least at the time, very formulaic, it was nice to see it at the end be like, we're just going to kick everything out the window and we're going to go with what makes more logical sense as an ending, which is the fact that Scott gains a love of himself, and therefore from there, he's able to achieve the things that he wants to. I always found that to be a better written ending, and to me, that does seem rather bizarre from the critic to say that is the point.
Well, we're not entirely sure that that's what they're referring to.
To me, in either situation, though, it seems critical, because as someone who used to review movies, it seems pretty obvious to any reviewer that the Knives situation is clearly she's obsessed with him, he is dealing with it because any sort of attention is good attention. Like, that was obvious to me even watching the film, and maybe that's just... that doesn't seem like that requires that much of an understanding of movies.
So, to prepare for this episode...
Right, yeah.
I actually went on to Rotten Tomatoes, and I read a bunch of the negative reviews.
I was going to say, currently, what is the score, out of curiosity?
I don't remember. I don't care about scores.
I know, but I do. Hang on. I will Google this while you're doing this.
Andrew's Googling it. So... I read a bunch of the negative reviews, and there was a common theme in a lot of them, which was that a lot of the negative reviewers just kind of tuned out after 20 minutes. Like, they specifically pulled that number out. Like
wow.
After 20 minutes, they just didn't care anymore.
Okay.
And it's like, wow, 20 minutes, that's less than a third of the movie.
Yeah, you're not really trying at that point,
Like,
people.
You showed up, and then you're like, oh, this movie's not for me. I'm going to tune out. Like, could you imagine, like, I can think of at least one other movie where it's like, if I had decided to do that, I would have missed an awesome movie.
Yeah. Or you're talking to someone who, as an entertainment critic, decided to plow his way through 3 seasons of a television show that he hated on simple principle. Like, I'm not about to let some form of media defeat me. By the way, for reference, Scott Pilgrim versus the World sitting at 81% on Rotten Tomatoes.
That's a wonderful score.
Fair enough, but yes,
81% is a good score.
It is a good score. When it comes to Rotten Tomatoes, I always have felt that anything above 70 means it's probably a must-watch film.
Now, the reason I don't care about the numbers,
yes,
is that, first of all, Rotten Tomatoes is essentially the same as like your Metacritics and things like that. They have no actual score of their own. It's all just an aggregator.
Yes,
and the problem with an aggregator is you're not getting an actual opinion. No. On the movie or the game or whatever it is. You're getting what the average is. And,
right.
At the end of the day, I would much rather find a specific reviewer who I either completely agree with or completely disagree with, or just a reviewer that I understand, so that when I don't just look at a raw number, I look at their actual write-up on something and understand what they mean by it, Like,
so I will say
something that someone might hate, might be a feature that I would actually really love.
Right. I will say this as someone who does pay attention to tomato meter scores. The one advantage that it does have above Metacritic is that because of the nature of the tomato meter either forcing a negative or a positive review, it does lead a little bit more towards something a little bit more concrete. Metacritic is, despite being positive or negative based, it is on a 100-point system, and it does lean typically towards like a more median sort of thing. The advantage to the tomato meter is that if you get enough positive reviews, even if they're just slightly positive, the tomato meter is mostly going to tip in your favor.
Okay.
So it does require a little bit more to it, which is why you can disagree, obviously.
I do.
That's fine.
A lot of it, no, I see where you're coming from, and I agree with what you're saying,
right?
For the way the system works. I also am one of those people that gets irrationally angry when I see a trailer on TV and like, we got a Rotten Tomatoes score of 100%. It's like, so?
Yeah.
What? That doesn't... Your movie just came out.
Yeah. Certified fresh is one of those things that, while I find it interesting, really doesn't mean jack.
Yeah.
I'm very much I will accept your score after it's been 4 years, which is why, no audience member can see it, but I'm wearing a Superman shirt. Why I really only started accepting Man of Steel's score when I started seeing it go lower. I really hated it when I walked out of the film, and, that could be an entire episode unto itself.
Well, I don't disagree with you.
Well, fair enough. All right, then we can't make it an episode of the podcast, now can I? But I really hated Man of Steel when I first walked out, but I felt like I was the one dissenting voice when it was at, 67 when it first came out. And then people saw Batman vs. Superman, and then they started seeing the cracks in Man of Steel, and that's where you start seeing the obvious parts. But let's go back on topic. So Scott Pilgrim.
Scott Pilgrim. Okay, so actually what we're going to do now is we are going to take a break.
Okay.
Neither of us have watched the movie recently.
Right, yeah. It's been 6 to 7 years. I saw it when it first came out and never watched it again.
So for me, it's been less time than that, but it's been quite a while since I've watched it.
Right.
We're going to...
by the way, we purposely put distance between us and the movie because we wanted to get as best of a judgment score as we could out of it.
That's exactly what I'm getting to, is that we specifically haven't watched it recently because we wanted to sit down, we wanted to talk about our memories of what we know about the film and where we're coming from a gut reaction about it. And we're going to, over the course of the next week, well, a week for us, for you, instantaneous.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to go our own separate ways. We're going to watch the movie and we're going to try and see it from the other person's perspective.
Yes.
Or just reevaluate how we feel about the movie. And then we're going to reconvene and really just kind of talk about if anything's changed, or if maybe you hate it even more than you thought you hated, or maybe
or maybe you love it more than you thought you did before,
or vice versa.
Exactly. The idea is that we're sitting down, at least for me, with a movie I haven't seen in 6 years, nearly 7 at this point, and trying to see whether I can appreciate things about it, and you talking with someone who very, very vitriolically dislikes it, and whether you can see some of the points that I have with it, and change our views from there, or maybe it does nothing.
You did a much better job summarizing that than
You're welcome.
Thank you. So, we'll see you next week.
Agreed. Okay, so in the time that we've been gone...
Yes, welcome back, everybody.
Yeah. In the time that we've been gone, we both sat down and watched the movie. John, how long had it been since you've watched it?
God, it's been... Okay, last time I saw that movie was probably about 2 years ago. Although I'm a bad judge of time.
Okay. Fair enough.
It could be longer, it could be less.
Fair enough. For reference, for me, it had been 6 years. The movie came out in 2010, which I didn't realize until I watched it again. I was Wikipediaing information to make sure that I got my stuff right. 2010. I was a freshman in college. That was weird.
Jesus.
I know, right? I realized that how harsh my opinions were about it may have been driven by that. John, you care to ask me how I think about the movie now?
Oh no, I figured we could just talk about whatever. What did you think? What did you think of rewatching Scott Pilgrim?
I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. Definitely, if I were to give it a star rating originally, which if it wasn't recorded, I would have guaranteed you I would have given it a 1 out of 5. After rewatching it, solid 3. Solid 3, maybe edging on a 4, but not quite in 4 territory, for reasons we'll obviously get into. But no, definite 3. Really enjoyable film.
So I tried to watch this movie from your perspective.
Yes.
I really tried to watch it from your perspective.
I know. I had a very contrarian view of that film.
The fact of the matter is, as soon as I started the movie, all of my endorphins just shot off, and I'm like, "This is the best thing ever. This movie is so good. I forgot how much I loved it. I forgot how great it was. Oh my god!"
So you felt like a 5-year-old just having like a pixie stick just snorted into their head, and you're just like, "Oh god, the sugar!"
Oh my god! In fact, I felt like that moment at the very beginning of the movie where Knives is sitting on the couch and everything gets elongated, and then it cuts to the opening credits. I'm like, oh my god, everything is just so great.
To quote 2001, well, not to quote 2001, but everything was full of stars.
Yes. Oh my god, it's full of stars.
Oh my god.
Oh, I thought that was just a Ready Player One quote.
No. You better be kidding.
For the record, that book is constructed out of quotes of other things.
Ready Player One is a good book.
I like Ready Player One. It was a fantastic book. I listened to the Will Wheaton audiobook version.
Oh, hey, he did record the audiobook, didn't he?
And that was neither here nor there because we're here to talk about Scott
Well,
Pilgrim.
no, I was actually about to transition by saying Scott Pilgrim is another thing made out of amalgamated parts. Mm-hmm. My transition is better. But no, to go back to Scott Pilgrim, so just in general, stuff that I fully realized that I was just completely wrong about, having rewatched it. The fights are fucking amazing.
Oh, aren't they?
I don't see how I didn't see value in them upon reviewing. Like, I genuinely do not get what past week version of me ever thought about that. Like, it is everything. Like, the choreography's great, the CGI is fantastic, like, the movie itself going for that very pixel nostalgic-y sort of feel. Like, I feel very pandered to, but in a way that doesn't offend me. Originally I felt the pandering was very, like, I want to say bare bonesy and very like, hey, look at this, we know Final Fantasy II was actually Final Fantasy IV, like that kind of like base level sort of knowledge.
Yeah.
But now that I've watched it again, I've realized not necessarily how deep the film is, but how that's not the point of it, and the references are there to tie together a narrative on top of it, and a narrative that is actually pretty decent.
Okay, so the thing that struck me when I was watching it was this most recent watch was the way that the main characters of the movie they all feel like fleshed out people.
Oh, totally.
Like they're all obviously like way deep into their own thing, but like at no point do I feel like these are not actual people that I know or have known in my life. Also, as a side note, everyone, in case we didn't mention it the first half, we are recording this in the back room of our favorite brewery, Hi-Fi Brewing Company in Redmond, Washington.
So occasionally you will hear a man who we know by the name of Stefan, occasionally walking in and out and changing different things, and he might occasionally say hi.
Oi!
There you go.
Yeah. Also, you may faintly in the background hear the occasional
because we are also paying attention to Game 7 of the Cubs World Series that is currently happening.
We happen to be recording during World Series Game 7.
And instead of paying attention to the World Series Game 7, we are currently in the back of a brewery talking about Scott Pilgrim because apparently neither of us care about baseball, even though even though I actually do, but we decided to record this earlier because my work schedule is an actual nightmare.
Fair enough.
But going back to Scott Pilgrim.
Let's go back to Scott.
Stuff that, I feel like I'm going to rule part of this for a little bit, just to talk about things that I feel like I was completely wrong about upon my initial assumptions when I first watched it. The music is glorious. So the thing is, I already kind of knew the music was awesome, mainly because I know it's not the music of the movie, but the music of the video game was recorded by Anamanaguchi, and a friend of mine got me massively into those guys, and I'm a huge fan of, I believe, God, what's the style that they... Chiptune. And I noticed just a lot of that and a lot of more punk elements that I remember enjoying when I was younger kind of bleeding into the soundtrack of the film. And it just genuinely making for a good film. It was nostalgic in a way that made me feel like the lyrics still bug me where I'm like, the lyrics mean nothing. But like from a raw sound standpoint, the musical talent was actually just quality.
I will make a minor caveat there. I'm pretty sure when Scott walks into the Chaos Theater at the finale of the movie for the first time, the song that Sex Bomb is playing, it sounded like they had the lyrics along the lines of basically proclaiming that they're sellouts and all they care about is money.
That was actually the whole gag, because as watching it yesterday, the whole thing that Kim had was, hello, we are Sex Bomb, we are here to sell out and make you feel sad about stuff. No, and like that was the gag.
We're here to sell out and make lots of money.
That's what it was. Yeah. During the Battle of the Bands, it was, we are a Sex Bomb, we are here to make you feel sad and think about things. Mm-hmm. Yes. I still remember quotes of this movie.
Okay, so the little touches, the little things that I really enjoy.
Yeah.
Like, first of all, as I mentioned in the first half, the song that inspired the character Scott Pilgrim was written by a band called Plumtree. So the very first Battle of the Bands they go to at the Rocket, this is when they're going against Crash and the Boys.
Yeah.
Is that the name? Yeah.
Something like that.
I'm so sad!
Yeah, the purposely angsty band.
Yeah, purposely angsty band with the tiny Asian drummer.
That feels like it's named after Crash Man from Mega Man 2.
Potentially.
I mean, those are the kind of references that you catch when you have no life.
So, the shirt that Scott Pilgrim is wearing is a Plumtree shirt. he is wearing a Plum Tree shirt.
Holy crap! I never caught that.
It's like,
that's good.
That's some really subtle referential here because he's always wearing like logo tees and stuff like that Sharpie T-shirt and all that kind of stuff. Like you could easily ignore it as just being Scott's wearing a Scott shirt.
Yeah, or I mean, even other stuff like there are so many video game references that are not necessarily subtle, but if you played any kind of video game, you could begin to recognize that there's Legend of Zelda music. Like
I would say that the movie is steeped in Zelda sound effects, but it's not steeped. It's like fucking littered with them.
It's primarily Zelda sound effects.
Yeah.
It's that, and I still like the Wallace finish him. That was great.
That's great. So I will also make a correction from last time.
Oh, yeah.
The P meter is not from Zelda 3. It's just a P meter. It's just a yellow bar. It's not. So leave me alone.
Getting no more Heroes flashbacks, except you're shitting in that game in the save feature. Regardless.
So,
no, go ahead.
Okay, so I got a whole bunch of notes I wrote down.
I forgot mine. I'm so mad about it. I wrote 20 pages.
For the record, I wrote down notes because you told me you wrote down notes. I'm like, oh shit, I gotta write stuff down.
And then I forgot mine. This is terrible. We're both awful at this. This podcast is ruined.
I just want to say that this movie has one of the strongest openings it could possibly have. Like, everything that leads up to the opening credits is just, it's great. You set up the characters. You know that they're in a band. You know that, obviously, Scott is a 22-year-old who's dating a 17-year-old. Named Knives Chow.
By the way, no, keep going. I won't interrupt you.
And they do a lot of really nice little embellishments that get you into the idea of how they're going to visually represent everything in the movie. From the way that they show text on the screen to little info boxes. It's a really good setup. And then when it does the thing where it just breaks into the opening credits, it's like, all right, this is the movie you're in for. If you didn't like that, you're not going to like the rest of the movie.
Right. I will say, I believe the term is in medias res. Am I wrong? I know way too many old school screenwriting terms, but
no, that's okay.
Let me look this up to be sure I'm using my terminology correct. The best way I can put it is very much a movie that feels like it's a world that's already lived in. When you first jump into Scott Pilgrim and the first line is you're dating a 17-year-old, and I don't know if that's the exact first line, but in medias res, opening in the midst of action. You
open in the middle of a conversation already in action,
and it's a conversation that is extremely important between Kim and Scott about like, wait, hang on, what are you doing? And it's a very nice way of just like you're walking into a world that has developed and exists without you, the audience member, and it feels very nice in that way, where we're not going to have the pretension of the idea that the fact that we need to explain everything to you. Here's the story, here's the movie, join us. And it feels very, not necessarily comforting, but it feels very, it's different in that way.
Well, in a certain respect, it could potentially make the viewer feel like they are in the room with the characters. Like they just came back from the bathroom or something.
Exactly. It feels the story is almost accepting that you know some of this stuff, or at least you know people who are similar enough to this where they understand that you kind of know what's happening. So it's a little bit hostile in that way, but I will say it is definitely an interesting take. I liked it, especially after watching it the second time. This time, I'm like, that is a good way to tell a story. It's a good opening.
So as a side note, on to the next.
On
to the next thing I wrote on this sheet of paper I got. The person that they got to play Scott's sister, Scott Pilgrim's sister,
Anna Kendrick is amazing.
She plays a perfect version of that person. Like, everything about her is like, this is Scott's younger sister. She's like way too deep into everything. And it comes off as a little dated now because it's like, oh, texting, and it's like it's getting a little dated.
Yeah.
But
I will say though, just as a side note, because this was in my notes constantly, and we'll talk about this when we get to a different point of something that like I was very much a fan of when watching it again. I am a huge fan of Anna Kendrick as an actress. First of all. Second of all, she portrays Stacy beautifully. I think most of my notes, whenever Stacy or his roommate Wallace appeared on screen, were just, I want more of this character, give me more of this character. They're both, and I get it, they're kind of one note where they're snappy and witty and like very different from Scott in that way, and maybe that's part of my problem with the movie, but we'll talk about that as we move on.
So the very
wonderful.
The very last note I have on my pages, is just in all big text. What did I write down?
It says Kieran Culkin.
Kieran Culkin.
Who is the actor who plays Wallace.
Kieran Culkin, he owns that role.
Oh, he kills it in this movie.
He fucking crushes it. Like, everything about that scenario. And as a person who, when I was in college, I was commuting up to Redmond from Federal Way, which is like a 35-mile commute.
That is pretty bad.
And spending 12 hours a day at school. The last thing you want to do is drive 35 miles when you're dead tired.
Yep.
So I would kind of just crash at people's houses, couch surf and stuff like that. And there's a certain aspect of the dynamic situation between Scott and Wallace that really strikes home for me, because it's like everything in this tiny little apartment is Wallace's, except for one or Scott's coat and his stupid poster.
Yeah. I still love that. That was actually, I will say this, moving on to a point I had on my notes, the sight gags are hilarious in this film. It's a genuinely very funny movie, and not necessarily because of the actions of Scott, but I would say the supporting cast around him is, first of all, extremely strong, and second of all, hilarious. And combine that with the already funny sight gags, and you get a genuinely entertaining film as far as just comedy value.
So, a lot of the reviews that I read about this movie before we did the first half of this episode referred to Ramona's character as being cold. I don't really think she's cold. I think she does a good job representing a person who probably has trust issues.
That's I think the best way of putting it, really.
She's not colder than you would expect someone to be in her situation.
Yeah. I think that's the best way of putting it, is that Ramona, despite the fact that I can see where they're coming across with cold. I mean, the first date they have is in a freaking blizzard, for God's sakes. If that symbolic reference got lost on you, they go from a blizzard to literally warming each other with their bodies. So if you wanted any more just brilliant, up-in-your-face symbolism, I don't know what's wrong with you, because it seems pretty obvious. But no, yeah, it's actually, she makes for a good character in that way. I think she's nuanced and interesting, and despite the fact that she comes across as cold, it comes from a place of a very good reason.
Oh yeah,
I think you're right.
Also, I have where is it? Oh yeah, so Ramona mentions that she uses the pathway through his brain as a shortcut to get around. So does that mean when they go through the Star Door together, Scott is in fact traveling with her through his own brain?
Oh God, I don't know.
Do we want to go down that rabbit hole?
No.
Is that something? Should we just let that go?
Oh, we have more important things to talk about, but that actually sounds like a very fun rabbit hole. But no, important things to talk about.
In 40K, the Eldar called that the webway. It was transcending space and time outside of the
actually,
warp.
yeah,
didn't they go through hell in that?
No, that's the warp. That was the immaterium. The
for reference, Stefan is here, and we're currently getting off topic and talking about
I had some time on my hands cleaning the cake, so I'm just standing here like a jackass.
Yeah.
Well, you're more than welcome.
No, he is kind of wonderful, everybody. But no, for reference with that, so I don't know. There are many. And I will say this, and that's kind of what I like about the movie, is there's very metaphysical elements that they just don't explain that I'm actually kind of okay with. Maybe it's just the fact that I'm very cool with the hand-wavy sort of, whatever, it works because it works. Like Ramona pulling the giant sledgehammer out of her purse. I don't care, that was awesome.
But that's literally called hammer space. That's the expression. You're pulling the hammer out of nowhere. That's what it's called.
Well, okay, so here's another note that I had when I was watching. Everyone in this movie has a superpower.
Yeah,
everyone, even the minor characters. The lady that's just the person who has a million jobs, whose name I can never remember. She wears glasses.
Julie.
She has this ability that is understated in the movie, where if she is releasing an extreme emotion, she can shut off power. She can also do that thing with her mouth where it leaps things out.
That was actually kind of funny. They did talk about that in the film.
So there is that. She has superpowers, and she's a minor character. Knives, a girl in high school can suddenly just become a fucking ninja warrior.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome.
Wallace has super gay powers, where he can turn any straight man gay.
It is Kieran Culkin playing Wallace being amazing. That's not a superpower.
Okay, so for the record, I will say
character.
It has to be a superpower, because they were at the first show, and he sucked at trying to pick up Scott's sister's boyfriend. He's like, hey, do they rock or do they suck?
No, that was pretty bad. There was a lot of fail happening there.
Yeah, no, okay, so I have to say, he has a superpower to make otherwise straight people gay. like,
I assumed that was
or
the
just
gag.
sexually open.
But okay, so regardless, going back to the film in general, I legitimately see a lot of flaws in my original argument. I think the supporting cast is glorious. Everybody. Mary Elizabeth Winstead did an amazing job as Ramona. Kieran Culkin did amazing as Wallace. Anna Kendrick did fantastic as Stacy. The girl who played Knives, I don't actually know her name, but she was phenomenal.
It's all right. For the record, I don't know anyone's name who acted in this movie except for Kieran Culkin and Michael Cera.
And Chris Evans, who plays one of the ex-boyfriends.
Yes.
And Jason
because
Schwartzman.
Captain America is in this movie as a action star, which
yeah.
Wow, did anybody else
Oh my God,
feel
I
that
didn't
was a
even-
little
I
bit
didn't
on the
even catch
nose?
that.
Yeah, that was Captain America.
Now, mind you, this movie came out before Captain America.
Right.
started
No, but
filming,
it's still
so-
funny though to be like, yeah, Captain America did achieve that thing he did in Scott Pilgrim and to become an action star. Way to go, Chris Evans. As if Chris Evans needs my accolades. That man's glorious in this film.
It's called The Grind, bro.
That was so good. I actually think I wrote down. I remember I was looking through my notes. I think I wrote down this movie needs more goddamn Chris Evans, and I was so mad when he died. And actually, this will go back to one of my first major criticisms after watching it again. Criticisms that I feel can be leveled.
Let us transition into criticisms.
The criticism that I still feel can be leveled at this film. It is a blitz of a film. It is barely under 2 hours, and it is just constant. And I am under the full opinion that the Todd fight, the fight with the vegan, was so climactic that if they had chosen to make that the end way point of a first of two films, I would have been fully accepting of that, because then you can actually involve the relationship with Envy more, which I don't think was touched upon very much in this movie, outside of a very needless couple of arguments that feel, to me, pretty forced.
Oh, yeah.
And then you can have that final climactic, because that fight felt very much like, and the movie's over. If they had cut it there at the 60, I think it was actually near the 60-minute mark, they cut it at the 60-minute mark, made a new film and added in 30 more minutes of character development of between Ramona and Scott, of actual discussions and talking and them actually becoming real people and not just making the fights
that actually
the
would
main
have
points. That would have been good.
That would have been great because, well, first of all, the problem there is based off the reception of the movie, it wouldn't have gotten the second part, which that would have been sad.
Do you know why Scott Pilgrim got I don't know if you guys have touched on this, so Scott Pilgrim got really crappy reception. Critically, it was kind of panned, but audiences who actually did see the movie really enjoyed it. The big criticism that I have against Scott Pilgrim is that it came out the same week as the first Expendables movie.
Right.
Yeah.
So
it's dumb planning.
So here's this movie that is funny, it is smart, it is got great music, great action, everything that you would think our generation, our demographic would want, and literally everybody else went to see some schlocky, by-the-numbers action movie with all these 80s fucking C and B list action stars, and it made a fuck ton of money, which is why there are 3 of those movies.
But
and
as
only one
someone
Scott
who
Pilgrim.
chose to watch The Expendables, there is also something to be said about a movie that has a very, very different sense of fun to it. That film wasn't taking itself seriously, and there is something kind of fun about just being let's blow shit up.
Yeah.
It's made by the same guys who ran, if you guys know anything, the Canon Film Group.
Oh, of course.
It's made by the contemporaries of the Canon Film Group. They were actually former directors that after Canon Films tanked, they're like, hey, let's keep making schlocky dumb movies because this is fucking fun. And then they just decided to make more schlocky dumb movies, and that's The Expendables.
For the record, schlocky dumb canon films are some of the best films you could possibly watch while drinking with your friends.
Death Wish 3 is one of the dumbest, most gloriously amazing films I have ever watched.
On that same level, I think it's called I want to say Terror Attack USA.
No. Invasion USA with Chuck Norris.
Invasion USA with Chuck Norris.
With Chuck Norris.
That movie is the tits.
It's a bit more high production, but it's such a stupid concept, and I enjoyed every second of it. The first Crank movie. With Jason
the
Statham.
Crank movies are great for that.
The first movie, here's the funniest thing. So, spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen this first movie. Mine came out 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
It ends with Jason Statham having been jabbed twice with these 2 adrenaline things, so his heart running is super on overdrive, and he's literally falling from a helicopter. He hits a car, bounces off it, and rolls a dozen times into the street. And the ending shot is his face, just his eyes dead. And then there's a pause, and then his heart starts beating again.
Isn't that what leads to High Voltage? The one where he literally needs to eat electricity to keep his heart going?
Yeah, well, and here was the funny thing that I'm okay, I could kind of buy that he could survive that if every single bone in his body wasn't fucking broken from falling 3,000 feet
I feel like...
and crashing into a goddamn car.
I feel like...
And that's the funny part. I was with my suspension of disbelief was going literally until the last 10 seconds of the movie. And I'm like, no, I'm out. No, I can't do it.
I will say,
that was my catch.
it reminds me of the armor from Berserk, where it's like, the adrenaline is like, we're gonna put all your bones back together. You're not gonna be happy about it, and you might bleed to death, but we're gonna do that. It's the Berserker armor. That's exactly what I think.
Okay.
Anyway, no,
back to criticisms.
Yes.
I have one question for you before you get back to your regular criticisms.
Yeah, of course.
How did you feel about Vegan Ex Machina?
Okay. So
for the record, tell. I will say, okay, so the only way that Scott is able to beat Todd is by doing the sort of mind trick kind of thing, where it's sort of like, well, which cup is the poison in kind of thing.
It's a Princess Bride joke.
Yeah, except Princess Bride did it better.
Well, of course, but Princess Bride does most things better. But it's a Princess Bride joke. Like, it's very clearly a Princess Bride reference, and anyone who says to the otherwise either knows a deeper reference than myself, or I'm wrong, which is very unlikely. But the one thing that I did like that, but here's where I run into the problem of I think it should have been 2 movies. Because I feel like in a 2-movie scenario, you could have had like a clash of wills. You could have had it's in this, like, you could have turned that into a gag between the two of them and an actual conflicting moment as a Deus Ex Machina to end the film. It would have actually been a very good gag to end on, because then you prove Scott, despite his lack of fighting skills and despite his overall intelligence, is still a clever guy who can win his way through snarky comments and like clever tactics. And that would have actually been a very good place to end on. I actually like that as a character building moment for Scott to be like, I'm not smarter than you, I'm not stronger than you, I'm not better at playing bass than you, and I don't have superpowers, but I am more clever than you. And that's what I need to win this. And I actually like that from a character building standpoint, where it's like, that makes Scott a more interesting main character to be like, he can't win in these major regards that we all consider hero sort of traits, but he can outsmart you, and that's actually kind of a nice trait. I liked that.
He's not the strongest or the sexiest guy in the room, but he's the smartest.
And that was
the situation.
That was interesting, and I actually kind of like that. He's street smart and had that kind of like clever route where he's like, I'm not gonna win this if I just punch him. How do I get his powers gone? And that's kind of cool. I just think that was one of those moments where I realized that I was at the halfway point in the movie, and that if we had cut that into 2 films, we could have gotten a way better that as a climactic clash of wills sort of thing.
Immediately, if that's around the 60-minute mark, you could have added another 30 minutes onto that first half, and really just kind of fleshed out.
You could have added 30 more minutes, because I also think as much as people do like the relationship between him and Ramona, I think it is very, very forced. Thank you, Stephen. It is very forced at the beginning. The fact that they're just like, I get the whole we're having sex now kind of thing, but even then, she is an Amazon delivery chick who is basically getting hit on by the guy she just dropped a package off to. Like, that is... I get what they're going for with the idea of her being disconnected from, like, the things that are happening around her, and fine. Like, that's fine from an argumentative standpoint. I'm certainly not judging either of them for their actions. I don't care about that. I feel like the development of that into a relationship was bad writing.
No, I will have to agree with you on that.
Yeah. And it's one of those classic, I feel like it was done better in the comics, which to me doesn't serve as an argument for a movie, but does bring up something.
I don't know, because I haven't read the actual graphic novel.
Okay, so we're both going in without any knowledge of the graphic novels.
No, I mean...
I've read the graphic novels. Hi, I'm jumping back in again. I've read the graphic novels up to book 6. And simply because of the nature of the medium, you have a 150, 200 page graphic novel per issue, or per book. You obviously can do a lot more. And trying to translate 650 to 200 page books into a not quite 2-hour movie, you're going to have some shortcuts. And that's the nature of any comic book movie. Like, just about anything.
I guess this is why I was always frustrated with... it's a similar reason to why I was frustrated with the Last Airbender movie. And we were not getting into
Let's not get into The Last Airbender!
But I will say this. It's the same reason that when I first saw it, I was just like, why in God's name are they doing this? Because you're trying to cram the entirety of Book 1, which is...
Guys, even as a goof... Don't watch The Last Airbender.
God, no, I could not agree more with that statement.
Hey, visually it's very impressive. The special effects in that movie look great. The rest of that movie, which is 90%
Yeah, you
of
get
it,
a lot of
is
time to
absolute
enjoy
fucking
those
shit.
special effects too.
Yeah.
Because the rocks, they just
Anyway, but it's a lot of the problem I had with The Last Airbender, where it's like you're trying to adapt a very large piece of fictional media into something that is a shorter form, and yet trying to represent all of the themes and ideas that the original form is representing. I'm not saying that Scott Pilgrim could do it.
I believe that's called the reverse Hobbit effect.
Yeah, actually, yeah. It's that frustration because I find that when I'm watching Scott Pilgrim, I found that when I was watching Scott Pilgrim to think, well, this could have been done so much better if they actually had the decency to cut this into multiple films rather than saying, we're going to shove everything into one movie.
Or at the decency, have it to give it another half an hour in running time, half an hour, 45 minutes. If it was 2.5 hours, I think just a little bit more time to pad certain things out.
Exactly.
So even
make the fact that Scott has to actually take responsibility for his shit at the end of the movie,
which was
carry some real actual weight.
and actually give a feeling for passage of time also works too.
Yes,
because
it felt like a week.
Yeah, it's like we're doing this over the course of a week, maybe 2 weeks tops.
Yeah.
3 if you're really squinting your eyes and are stretching it a little bit.
I agree, actually, completely. The movie didn't have any sense of time to it. I will also say, moving on to, I think it was the second major criticism, I still hate Scott Pilgrim, the character.
Oh, yeah. No, don't get me wrong. Scott Pilgrim, the character, is a self-centered asshole.
But that's not the reason. I hate... that is part of the reason. I'm not gonna lie, that is part of the reason. I will say that the thing that frustrates me about the movie, and once again, Stefan will comment if it's not like this in the books, or...
it's been a while since I've read the book, so I'm not going to hold you to anything.
Fair enough. I will say the one major thing that did frustrate me about the movie was the fact that they kept telling me things about Scott. They kept telling me he was a lady killer. They kept telling me that he was this, like, formerly awesome guy. They kept telling me that he had these things. They never showed me that in the film. I never felt it.
First of all, there's no way you can dress up Michael Cera as a lady killer.
But I think that's part part of the problem. It's a major casting issue that I don't think was fully addressed in the film.
Who do you think could have played a better Scott Pilgrim?
I don't actually. I would have accepted Tobey Maguire, to be very honest.
Too old.
No, but like a younger, fine. But if we're doing dream casting, like a younger...
Well, of course, he's supposed to be like 24 or 25 in the comics. He's in his mid-20s.
He's 22 in the film. They make a very big deal out of that.
Yes, they make a very big deal
in the book.
Well, because they're also trying to make it less creepy that he's dating a 17-year-old. And they're like, he's 22, that's 5 years. Whereas in the books, it's like, that's a decade of difference.
Or 27.
This is weird.
Yeah.
No, and that's actually, they make a reference at the very beginning. Like, aren't you like 27? He's like, no, I'm 22. 22.
Cut to a text box saying
Wink,
that he's 22.
nod.
We're not terrible. Anyway, but like Tobey Maguire, if they'd either gone with the original age or like Tobey Maguire from the beginning of the first Spider-Man movie, I would have accepted. Because then I would be like, all right, he's at least like he's good looking. He's got like his own thing going on. He seems like maybe he can pull this off. I would have preferred like a James Franco or something, personally.
You see, even now, I'm trying to... The character is just so, because of how the art style in the comic books, and I'm trying to imagine, it's like, all right, how do you try and transfer that or twist it to live action? I'm still struggling to see any of those guys as Scott Pilgrim. I thought Michael Cera did okay. I did not think he was Scott Pilgrim. No. Like, he was not my first choice, but... For the life of me, I couldn't tell you what my next better choice would have been instead of Michael Cera.
Well, what I also think a lot of the frustration, and I've said this many a time about Attack of the Clones, is as frustrating as Hayden Christensen is, and in this case as frustrating as Michael Cera is, and he is not good for the part, just like how Hayden Christensen wasn't good for Attack of the Clones. Anakin, a lot of the problem falls on the writing. I don't think Pilgrim was as well written as he could have been. A lot of his lines, and I get the idea of he's a self-centered asshole, and I get the idea of he's overly arrogant, or he has like these attributes about himself that he's trying to emphasize. He felt very infantile to a degree that I didn't believe the character traits that everybody else was trying to put on him. Because of the way Ramona and the other characters talked about him, he felt like he didn't have any of the qualities that they were stating he had, and they were trying to sell me as an audience member of like, oh, he's caring, or he's these other... not caring necessarily, but I'm using this as an example. He's these things. And when I watched Michael Cera acting in that film, I'm like, this is not the man I'm seeing. And I get where they're coming from of these are the things that we want to attribute to this character, but they don't come across in the film.
I will say I agree with you on the whole lady killer kind of like guy who always has a girl kind of thing, and he's a heartbreaker and all that kind of stuff. I think Michael Cera is perfect for all the other traits of Scott Pilgrim, though. I believe that he's the bass player of that band. I believe that he knows a lot about video game history.
Sure.
I believe that he can, be witty and charming, but not necessarily in like a sexy way.
But I also don't think, to me, those aren't the important things about Scott Pilgrim. I think in the end, those are the character, those are the things that he does as a character. Mm-hmm. But to me, when I see Scott Pilgrim as a character in the movie, he is a desperate, lonely, but here's the thing, but still confident sort of guy, where he still has that sense of I know what I'm doing, but I'm still very afraid of the things that I'm doing. And I mean that we talked about this in the first episode. That's why he attaches to knives, the idea that he can get someone who just constantly compliments him about what he's doing in his life. And the Scott Pilgrim they're trying to sell me as from a character standpoint doesn't come across not just because of Cera's performance, but because the writing it writes him as a 16-year-old. Like the jokes aren't funny. The lesbians line, I don't know why anyone finds that funny. That fell completely flat for me because I'm like, this is just an idiot trying to turn everything into a gag. And that isn't what I see Scott Pilgrim as.
Well, and that's kind of the crux of the character, even within the comic books, is he's kind of a dumbass who doesn't really have his shit together. And that's actually the name of one of the chapters or one of the books. It's Scott Pilgrim Gets It Together or something, some garbage like that. Mm-hmm. And at the end of book 6, there's actually like a 2-year time skip after the end of the climactic showdown, because the movie was written before the end of book 6.
Right.
So they had to have a movie ending, which, okay, the movie ending kind of makes sense. But
I actually like the ending.
Which is fine. No, the movie ending is great. The whole core of Scott's arc over the course of 6 odd books is he is becoming, slowly but surely, tripping and stumbling all the way, becoming a more fully fledged adult. And it is this journey. If nothing, Scott Pilgrim can kind of be boiled down as a coming of age story with crazy action, but it's a coming of age story as a guy in his mid to late 20s, which I think is something we can all relate to in certain ways.
Yes, but it reminds me a lot of actually my best comparison is one of my favorite shows of all time, which is Yu Yu Hakusho. It reminds me a lot of a shonen anime that has a character who... Actually, Yusuke is probably my favorite interpretation of the Scott Pilgrim character. A guy who is very self-confident in the actions that he's taking, yet slowly begins to realize how stupid all of those are as he begins to see what the rest of the world for what it is. That's the entire gag with Yusuke in Yu Yu Hakusho. He's a punk-ass 15-year-old.
Who thinks he knows everything because he's a punk-ass 15-year-old.
Who dies, and then after realizing the scope of everything in the world, comes back and realizes, oh, god damn it, I really have no idea what I'm doing. And the rest of the rest of the 100-some episodes of the show are him pulling himself back together, realizing his context in the universe, accepting that, and then just becoming a better person. And I feel like in Scott Pilgrim, I didn't get that. And once again, it's the length of the film. I'm still argue that is the primary issue with this movie, is the fact that they didn't cut it into 2.
Right.
Is that you just don't get the feeling for those arcs.
Okay, so that thought, I have to agree with you about... I feel like they should have cut it into 2 movies. Yeah. But I have to also have you accept that if they had done that, there wouldn't be the second half.
I don't necessarily agree. I think if you had adequate marketing execs who realized maybe don't put this on the same week as the Expendables and actually added more character development to it, because I think another major problem with it is, despite the fact that I love the supporting cast, I love every single person on that supporting cast. Wallace, Stacy, Ramona, Knives, Julie, everybody. Everything. The issue is that despite the fact that I love them, they're very one note.
Yeah.
They're very single personality sort of characters. They mention a relationship between him and Kim.
No, actually,
I didn't see something.
No, I
between
like the fact. Okay, maybe we'll come back to this.
Totally.
But we are running a bit long right now.
Yeah, of course we are.
I have 2 things that
sure.
I want to
ask.
Hit
me.
First of all, was there ever a moment where you doubted that Sex Bob-omb was actually a band?
No.
Yeah.
Actually, that was good.
I think that's one of the greatest successes of this movie, is that you had this group of people that's supposed to be just like a garage band, and you believe they are a band. Yeah. I've seen that done terribly.
Oh yeah, totally.
Detroit Rock City. Perfect example.
It's every single second of that film, it felt like a bunch of stumbling 20-somethings trying to figure out how to function in a band. It was wonderful.
You were supposed to be John Connor. Sorry.
Yeah, no, but I love that about the band, especially
Yeah.
with Kim on drums and everybody doing their thing. It was great. They felt like they were a stumbling bunch of 20-somethings who were just pretty good at instruments and now finally found something.
So, and can I get like final thoughts on the movie?
Okay, so I fully admit I was wrong. It was a good film. There was a lot of enjoyable stuff in it. I love the effects. I love the nostalgic feel of it. I love the music. The acting outside of Scott is phenomenal. Every single character outside of Scott is fleshed out and enjoyable. The fight scenes are awesome. I do have problems with Matthew Patel for reasons that are obvious.
Well,
because,
to me, not to the listener.
well, yes, but okay, fair enough. To give the Indian guy mystical fire powers that are also based on Bollywood music is kind of frustrating for an Indian man watching it again being like, right, I remember being really pissed off about this. I'm still really pissed off about this. Yeah, but overall, it was a solid 3. It's a good movie. It's I would if it was on the television, I wouldn't change the channel. It's good.
That's fair.
But yeah, still got problems with Cera, and still got problems with the fact that the pacing is pretty screwed up.
All right.
So what's the next episode?
So, I gotta tell you, I fucking hate No More Heroes.
What?
See you next time, folks.